Good morning, nerds. Today we are going to work on health pickups. This is episode number 8 of our first-person shooter tutorial. As always, if you have not done the previous installments, that's probably a good idea to do first, although today's won't connect as directly to some of the previous ones as many of the previous ones have done. So it doesn't necessarily, this is one that you really could do out of order. We've moved into kind of the stretch goals phase of this project, so future installments will not build on each other as directly once you've got the first 6 or 7 tutorials done. So we're on episode 8, which is the health pickup, and this one is a pretty independent one. So we're gonna keep things pretty simple today. What I want to do with this one is I want to set myself up a rotating sphere that allows me to collect health, and we're going to do a couple quick things. We're going to first off build a pickups engine that would allow us to potentially expand this to other kinds of pickups later. In the past, I've done things like, it's a triple shot boost or a speed boost or things like that. We aren't going to get that far today. We're going to do like one-time only kind of pickups, but this would also work out really nicely for ammo drops. If we were keeping track of ammunition, this would work well for any kind of one-time hit kind of pickups. And as we typically do with my material is we're going to try to set this up so that we can do a lot of our editing in the inspector, do a lot of cloning if we want to. I could make some bigger health pickups that did more hit points and some smaller ones that did less. This entire system is very, very customizable, and it's going to play nicely because, as always, we are going to be making some prefabs. This is going to play really nicely if we wanted to do something like a pickup spawner, which we might try to do in a future installment. So there's a lot of potential here. So the first thing that we're going to do is, unsurprisingly, we are going to set up a prefab. I feel like that's how we start every adventure, but that's okay. So I'm going to go to I'm going to get my prefabs tab open. As usual, I'm going to do a create empty. We're going to zero this kid out. No big surprises to those of you who've watched the other videos. And I'm going to go ahead, name this kid health pickup. Drag it into my assets, into my prefabs folder, and click on open prefab. So no big shockers here. The build for this is going to look very, very similar to what we did with the enemy spawner. We're going to make a sphere. Now this one I want to do as a glass sphere with like a first aid cross in the inside of it. That feels fairly iconic to me, and it's also going to give us a chance to play with some material types that we've never played with before. So I'm kind of looking forward to that cooler opportunity. So we're going to start this off, unsurprisingly, we're going to start off with a 3D object. We are going to make a sphere. There it is. I'm going to kind of just zoom in on it so we can see it a little bit. Kind of like what we did with the enemy spawner, I'm just going to take that sphere and lift it a little bit using my green arrow. And I'm just going to kind of try to get it, I don't know, up a little bit so it's off the ground. I can kind of see it, and that feels pretty good to me. This is probably good enough. I also may want to pay attention to like its relationship to gun heights, because the way this collider is going to work, it can potentially intercept a bullet. And so I want to think about if I have it positioned lower, it's not going to catch bullets quite as easily. If I have it higher, it's almost working as an obstacle. And so we have to kind of consider that in our design. Okay, so we've got that. We are going to go ahead and follow, again, a lot of our previous patterns. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that sphere collider on there. So we're just going to go ahead and remove that. And just because I like the habit that we're building here, I'm going to go ahead and on my main object, so up here on health pickup, we're going to go ahead and add a capsule collider. We've been using those for a lot of things. Again, this time I could use a sphere collider, but I just like using the capsule because then I'm also like touching the ground, which makes me feel pretty good. And it allows me to kind of just envelope the circle. So we're going to go capsule collider. we're going to go ahead and set that radius to, actually, I can't remember if 0.5 is correct for that, but we are definitely going to set that height to 2. That's right, 0.5 is going to be fine for this. Just like we've done in the previous installments, we're going to set the Y of the collider to 1, and that is going to make it gently kiss the ground, but everything else is good, and it's going to give us just a little bit bigger collision boundary here. And actually, you know, for this one, I do want to kind of lower it. It just kind of is going to interfere with things in a weird way. And I'm not super thrilled with that. So we're going to lower this one down. We're going to go like 1.5 on the height maybe. And yeah, that feels a little more natural. And so the Y position, since that always has to be halved, I could do, if I knew it was 0.75, I could do it that way, but we're going to pretend I don't know math. We're going to do 1.5 divided by 2 to set that height, which is 0.75. For those of you who are like, wait, that was right math? It is. What we were doing is pretending that I wasn't able to do that in my head. So that looks a lot better. It's a lot tighter. It still gives me a little bit of room, but that's a lot cleaner, I think. And I could nudge that down a little bit further, but I think this is good enough. Okay, so we've got our collider. We are also going to add ourselves a rigid body. That's probably not explicitly necessary for this one, actually. Since our player has one, technically an object only needs to collide with one rigid body, but I just feel like this is good practice. Because nothing else is going to be able to interact with this on a physics level, we're just going to freeze position, rotation, and scale. We don't have any reason to need other things to be able to spin those, and we're going to get rid of gravity. That should put us in a pretty good spot here. That should make this object work. I'm going to go ahead and hit play here and just see if I can see it. And there it is. It's showing up, and that's working out pretty nicely for us. It looks, I mean, it's obviously doesn't look like a health pack there, but it does look good. The one thing I am noticing, though, is the sphere is a little low and kind of tough to see, and part of that's because it's white, and we're going to be fixing that in a moment anyways, but I feel like I just want to lift it just a little higher. So we're going to nudge that up a bit. I'm just kind of trying to nudge it so it's kind of towards the top of that glow, but I don't want it too high. So really right now I'm just kind of futzing with the placement. That placement feels a lot better. I kind of like that. It's hovering up there, but that feels good. And the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to back out of my prefab for a minute, and just to avoid having to test this all the time, I'm going to take my enemy spawner, and hopefully I remember to turn this back on by the end of the tutorial. But if we jump into the next tutorial, if you're watching episode 9 going, how did the spawner come back? I may have just rechecked this during my, during the hiatus there, but I am going to uncheck the enemy spawner so that game object doesn't interact anymore. And I'm going to do the same thing to enemy. Right now, it's just about me and the health pickup. So we're just gonna be alone for a minute. Cue romantic music. Okay, so now we've got our objects kind of getting started here. That's starting to look kind of good. It definitely does not look like a health pack in any way, but it is what we want it to be. So next project, what we need to do is, again, we're going to go back into that prefab editor. That's fine. And we're going to create a new material. And again, I said this a little bit ago, but I want to make this one kind of feel like glass. So I want to have it be like a glass orb that we can look at. And there is a bunch of ways. As always, there's a ton of ways we can accomplish that. But one of the easiest ones, we're not going to clone a material this time. I'm going to generate a brand new one. So I'm going to go into my materials folder. I'm going to say create material. And we're going to do we're going to call this one glass. And we're going to do something we haven't done before, and that is we're going to mess with the rendering mode on this material. Opaque is great, just like the name implies. You can't see through it. It's a solid color, and that's been really good for the objects that we've had so far. It allows us to do some really nice things with our metallics and such. But this time we're going to use the transparent material. And immediately we're not going to notice a difference, but as we go through and edit some of our other settings, we will, especially color. So one of the most important attributes of color in most game engines is a thing that we haven't really discussed so far, and that's the alpha channel. The alpha channel is the fourth piece of the RGBA color set, and it represents the amount of opacity or transparency of a color. Opacity as we get closer to 255 and transparency as we get closer to 0. And as you can see here in my preview window, it looks like it's just turning things gray. So like here's white, here's black, here's gray, but that's really not a very good sampler. Most of that color is coming because we have a gray background in our window. So to be able to really see what we're doing here, I'm gonna lay this material on the object, and you can actually start to see, I don't know how well this is picking up on YouTube, but you can actually start to see some of these grid lines through the object. And so now I'm gonna go back into here and I'm gonna nudge this alpha down even more. And if I nudge it to 0, you can see that we can completely see through this, but we're getting some specular highlight from the ambient light. And we're getting kind of this aura effect off of the light. And again, that's really coming from our specularity. We'll deal with that in a second. We don't want to be completely 0 alpha, although that does give us some really cool ability. But I'm going to nudge this up. I'm going to do an alpha of about 20. And that's going to give us a little tiny bit of solid to us, a little bit of opaque, but it's going to be very, very see-through. And as you can see here, we can mostly see through it. If you wanted to, this is a good opportunity to also give it a little bit of a tint. So if I start moving it more towards, like if I move hard red, it does definitely have a pinkish cast to it. Again, that's not showing up real well against our dark blue. But if I back out of here you don't have to follow along with this step, but I'm going to back out for just a second. We can kind of see it right here. It's definitely got, especially if you kind of move it up where you can see it against the brown, there's definitely a pinkish hue there, and you know, it's very transparent. I'm not really a fan of how transparent this is actually. So I think we're gonna thicken it up just a little bit. So we're gonna go back into our material. And for now, since we're in the material phase, I can just do it straight in here in the scene, and I'm gonna really see how it looks in scene. So again, I'm going to nudge that color. I'm going to actually nudge it down a little bit. So I'm going to go hard left and go into these grays a little bit. I'm a big fan of hanging out around 192. So 193 is close enough. I'm really more of a fan of hitting those grays. And we're gonna opacity this up just a little bit. We're gonna adjust some things with specular and stuff to bring this out too. But I'm going to go up to like 40 there. That's going to feel a little bit better. Again, we can't really see it too clearly here. We're going to do some other improvements in there to make that a little bit better. But for now, this is good. Okay, then we can adjust a lot of our other sliders. We're going to get a lot more. For example, if I do high specularity, we can definitely, it's making that glass stand out a little bit. If I go low spec, it's actually not getting any reflection off the light, and we can definitely see through it. So the specularity is really affecting our light sources. And as we add metallic, that's going to add reflectivity, which is really going to make it materialize. And you'll notice that if I go full metal and full spec, we're getting perfect reflection off of our skybox. That's a bit much. We definitely don't need that, but it is kind of demonstrating the principle here of we can see through it, but we also get a lot of reflection. So I'm going to lower that down quite a bit. I don't want to even be able to tell that that's the skybox. So I'm going to reduce kind of both of these until it looks a little more natural and it looks a little more glassy. And really, this is just kind of fine tuning, but I don't want the object to completely disappear, but I also don't want to be able to tell that that's the skybox being reflected. So I'm kind of just nudging. That feels pretty okay right now. So I'm at a metallic of about 0.2 and a smoothness of just a little shy of 0.6. But we can definitely, we'll continue kind of adjusting that as we go. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do here, and I do need to be back in the prefab for this. So I'm going to go back to my prefabs folder, click on the glass ball, and open it up. This is looking better. The other thing that we're going to do here is, again, I wanted to add that like, the red cross kind of a cross into this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab inside the sphere, because I like to do things nested, because that's going to make my math easier, is I'm going to go ahead and create a small capsule, which that is definitely not a small capsule, but that's okay. And we're going to scale this down quite a bit. I'm going to start out with 0.1, 0.1, 0.1 and just see where that takes us. Okay, that's a little. That's far smaller than I wanted it to be, but at least this gives us a better understanding of where we're at. So I'm going to nudge this up a little bit. So I'm going to do 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. That's given me kind of the thickness I want. That feels pretty good in terms of thickness. But it's not good in terms of height, and the positioning still feels a little bit weird, but it says it's centered. I think it's just a forced perspective issue. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and change this up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just extend that Y value to 0.4, and that's going to give me a nice solid vertical, and it's kind of taking away some of the curve out of the bottom of that. So that's feeling pretty good. And I'm going to just duplicate that capsule because I like the proportions there. So I'm going to Control D that. And for this one, what we're going to do is I'm just going to do the exact same thing, but instead of Y, I'm going to change my Y back to 0.2 and my Z to 0.4. That did not work at all. Oh, that's right. Capsules need to be, we have to rotate. So we're gonna scratch that. We're gonna go back to the 0.4 and back to the 0.2. And I'm just gonna rotate it along my x-axis by 90 degrees. And that's gonna give us kind of this plus sign. And again, my camera is hitting it from a weird angle. So it looks a little deformed, but it's actually in the right spot. So we're just gonna trust that my math is good. And if I switch this into ISO, you can see pretty clearly that heads on, it looks correct. So I'm going to switch myself back to perspective, but it's definitely, depending on what angle you hit it, it looks a little funky. Okay, so we're going to go back to our materials, and I want myself a nice shiny red, and I want to make it look not like the enemy's more metallic kind of a red. So I'm going to try to make a really plasticky red. And I could mess with semi-transparent materials, and that is a lot of fun. I really do like the semi-transparents, but we're going to knock the albedo pure up into this like pure red corner here. And we're going to call this, I guess we should title this material. So we're going to call this, I don't know, red plastic. So we've got red plastic. And again, we're going to change that to a nice bright red that's kind of locked in, and I'm going to just drag it onto my two pieces again, so I can kind of see what I'm doing as I'm working with it. And it does not want to lock onto the other capsule. Let's just drag it here. No, come on. It is not enjoying this at all. Okay, so if you ever end up in oh, there we go, dragging it onto the capsule text. So if you ever end up in that problem, you can definitely drag it onto the game object itself, and that will usually work if there's a mesh renderer that can take a material. Alternatively, what you can do is click inside the object itself. So I've got my mesh. If I open up the materials folder, there's an option right here, and I can select red plastic, or alternatively, I could even click the little dot next to it and pick the item out of the list. So there's a lot of ways we can get there if the object isn't cooperating. The other thing I could have done is just turned off the mesh renderer on the sphere, which would have let me get to the cross inside of it and then put it back on. So there's, again, a ton of ways we can do this. And so now what I want to do is, and actually I think I am going to do that for a minute. I'm going to click on my sphere and just turn off the mesh renderer. And then now I can really just see that plastic more or less by itself. Again, I'm going to kind of spin around. I kind of want to look at it. It's getting a little bit of a blue tint off of the maps lighting here, which I'm not really excited about. I feel like that always deforms my color, but whatever. And I could play around with transparencies if I wanted to. That's kind of fun, but it's adding some, you're seeing the extra pieces of the shape there, which I'm not totally a fan of. So we're gonna go ahead and leave this as opaque. And now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust the metallic here. I'm going to adjust the smoothness way high. And I'm just kind of playing with this and trying to dial this in. I want a lot of smoothness so we get that plastic look. I want a little bit of metallic so there's a little bit of a reflection, but not a ton of it. And I feel like that's doing a pretty good job of hitting it. It's not as shiny as I'd hope, to be honest, but I think it'll be okay. And so I'm going to notch down my smoothness just a little bit. One of my graphic arts friends used to insist you should never have complete perfect smoothness and you should never have complete perfect roughness, which would be a value of 0. So I try never to go below 0.05 or above 0.95 just because it always feels wrong to me. And the same with metallic. I try never to hit 0 or 1. So there we go. And that's feeling pretty plasticky. It definitely has a different look than my metallic that I'm using for the enemies, so that way there's no confusion in terms of my visual language, which is always something important to be considering. So I'm going to click back on my sphere, turn back on that mesh renderer, and there's my completed health object. And if I go back into my game, that is looking a lot more like a cross in a sphere than what we were getting before. So that's pretty great. I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. It's a little sparkly on that corner there. I'm not sure if I'm really thrilled with that light glare, but it definitely is speaking glass sphere with a thing inside of it, which makes me pretty happy here. So I'm as happy as I'm going to get here, I think. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to take my health pickup. And now we need to start working on some code. And the code for the pickup itself is going to be pretty darn simple. So again, I do want to make sure I'm working off the prefab. So I'm going to click on the prefab down here. And I'm going to go down to add component. We're going to make a generic pickup script. And that's because we want to be able to potentially add on to this later and have other options. So we're just going to create and add that. And we're going to go ahead and go in. Okay, and I don't remember if we've talked about this. I think we may have. Hang on just a second. I want to look through my code and see if I see any enums. I don't know if we've talked about enum before, but I'm not seeing any. So I'm kind of assuming that we haven't. Yeah, it looks like we need to. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is what's called an enum. Typically, we haven't put any code above our class marker. This time we are going to. So in my pickup script, we are going to start out with public enum, and we're going to call this one pickup types. And we're going to set this, an enum is configured a little bit differently. You'll notice no parentheses or curly braces. That's because this is functionally... class is the wrong word, but we can kind of think of it like a class, I guess, sort of. But what this is this is a way to basically allow us to pick items out of a list. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, health is going to be one of our options. And typically enums, most of the standard coding standards I've seen have led to those being capitalized. But this is definitely a your mileage may vary kind of a thing. So, and I think my reference is more old school C++ than anything else. So we're going to leave that one capitalized. And the way this would work is if I was doing other pickups, like maybe I wanted to speed boost or something, I could do additional ones, again, following the names for variables and such in here, just separated by commas. And what's going to happen here, let's see here. Let's go ammo drop. Okay, so I've got a bunch of different pickups, and we're not going to code all these. In fact, I'm going to delete the other two here in just a couple of minutes. But the way this works is they are externally, like to us, it looks like we would refer to these as health, speed boost, and ammo drop. What's going to happen under the hood, though, is you can kind of see when I hover, it says pickup types.ammo drop equals 2. If I hover on this one, it says equals 0. Speed boost is going to be 1. What it's doing is it's actually converting these into integers. And the cool thing is under the hood, it's kind of like I said, pickup type equals 0. which means that we're getting all of the cool efficiency and math of using numbers for everything instead of words, because words are strings and those are really expensive. But I get the simplicity and coding of using words for things. The other nice thing is this allows us to very, very cleanly look and go, what are all the possible things they could be? And additionally in Unity, which is what we're going to look at in a second, these will appear like a drop-down list. So this is actually really neat for us. So I'm going to start off, so we created a type, and what we're going to do now is inside of our class, we're going to define a type of pickup types, a variable of pickup types, make that public and expose that to the inspector. So we're going to go public pickup types, because that's our new variable type. Whoops, that's pickup types, not pickup script. Pickup types, and we're going to call this pickup. Whoops, no, I'm supposed to be pickup. Okay, pickup types pickup. And we're going to give it a value. And because, again, we may potentially use this for some other things, maybe ammo drop, maybe speed boost, other ideas later. I'm going to go public float, and then I'm just going to call it, I'm going to make a generic float called value. Value is dangerous because there's some other things that are called value in different spots. So we're going to go my value. Okay, so we're going to use my value as the value in our float, or as our float. So if we're representing health, it'll be our health. If we're representing a speed boost, this could be the percentage of speed, or maybe a float that we add to our speed or something. But this is going to give us some very, very different types. And honestly, this is it. We don't even need to code anything in our start. We'll do some quick updates later that are just kind of fun, but really we don't need to do anything there. So we're going to go ahead and just save that. And we're going to jump back into our health pickup. And you're going to notice that we have pickup. And the cool thing here is this creates a drop down in pickup that we can use to pick out what kind of power up this is, which makes power up creation really easy in the inspector, because again, if we did like clones of these, you could have a game designer or an artist or somebody working on your team that's just allowed to select anything out of the drop down and play with it, that you've already created and enabled and written code for, etc. So we're only going to do the health one, but I just wanted to show how that dropdown works. And what we're going to do to start with is I'm going to have this health pack give us 10 hit points back. So we're going to call this one 10 for my value. Now, because I don't like leaving bad code around or features that are incomplete, I am going to go ahead and get rid of this. But I am going to leave myself a little note, can add more values with commas. And so I could potentially add, EX, health, comma, speed boost. Okay, so now I've given myself a little bit better clarity there. Okay, and actually I'm going to put those curly braces in just to make that note really stand out. And I could have copy pasted this earlier, but I didn't, so there we go. Okay, so now that we've got that done, really this is pretty good. We're going to do a couple of different things that I normally am not a big fan of, but that's okay. So we're going to save this, and then we're going to jump into our player script because we want the player to actually get healed off of this. So let's take a look at our collisions. We also need to do, I forgot about this step, but we do need to create a tag so that we know what kind of thing we just got hit with. So again, we're going to jump back into my pickups. We're going to go into tags. We're going to add a new tag. This will bring us into our tag editor. And I'm going to create a new tag called pickup, which I feel like makes some sense. So we created a new tag for pickups. Again, I'm going to go back to my prefab for my health pickup. I'm going to, whoops, I actually did this incorrectly before, so I'm glad I looked at this again. I'm going to change my value to 10 here, and I'm going to change this to pickup. And just because they're now out of sync, and I hate that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our health pickup. We're going to go to overrides. And since we did make the same changes to both of their scripts, I'm just going to say revert all. So it uses the one from my prefab, which is not going to make any actual changes to it, but it just forces them to sync up a little bit. So this is good. You'll notice it did receive the tag. It's received the pickup script. My rigid bodies and everything are still good. So this is pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to go into my player script, and in my player script, now we can basically run this exact same chunk of code here that we did with the other one. And the script that we want to do here is we're going to say, hey, if collision.gameObject.tag is equal to pickup, what do we want to do? Now, this one's a little tricky because, again, we may have different kinds of pickups. So what we're going to do is we're going to check to see, was it a health pickup? And so we're going to go in a little bit deeper, and we're going to say, hey, if actually we don't want to do a pickup script. We don't want to do a bunch of. We're going to basically do a get component, but we don't want to do a ton of get components. Get components add up and they get expensive after a little while, and we are going to need to check and see what the value of that pickup is. We're going to need to check a few different things. So what we're going to do here is we're basically going to create a reference to that to the pickup script. So we're going to do pickup script PS. We always generally use the abbreviation. For something like this, we would just use the abbreviation of the script that we're doing. So PS makes sense. And we're going to do PS is equal to collision.gameObject.getComponent pickup script. Whoops. Pickup script, parenthesis, parenthesis, and a semicolon. Don't forget the semicolon on the end of that. What that's going to do, actually, let's just make this window a little bit wider for people. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've got our pickup script here. We've got a reference, so now we can access anything on the pickup script, that's a mouthful, by using the abbreviation PS, and as long as we're still inside of this if statement here. And actually, just because I like the format better, we're going to change this if to an else if, so that if you get hit by a bullet, it's not even going to try to do this other stuff. Okay, so if you weren't hit by a bullet and you were hit by a pickup, we've checked your pickup script, and now we can start asking it some questions. We're going to ask it if it's a health pack. So if PS dot, what value did we use for that? I think it was, yeah, PS dot pickup equals, and here's the other part where this shines. Instead of having to remember a specific tag, we can literally just, as soon as we do dot pickup, it knows that that's a pickup type. And it's going to try to help us by asking us, which pickup type are you looking for? In this case, I want pickup types.health, so I'm just going to click on that. Okay, so if the pickup type is a health pickup, and the other thing that we want to check here is if it's health, but we also only want to check it if our health is not if we're not already at full health, because if we're already at full health, I don't want to waste the pickup by picking it up. I know some games do that and some games don't, so we're just not going to. So we're going to say and HP is less than HP max. So we are only going to pick up that pickup if it is, or we're only going to deal with it if it is a health pickup and our HP is less than HP max. If both of those are true, what we want to do is actually run this take damage function, because this is going to change our HP bar. This is going to do a lot of other stuff for us. And that's really why we wanted it to be a separate function. It's going to check our bar. It's going to prevent us from going over our hit points. There's a lot of good reasons to use this take damage, but pointing this out, first off, we do need to make us able to take damage again. That must be left over from a previous tutorial. So I'm no longer invincible. But I also need to make sure that the damage that I'm taking, since this is intended to heal us, we need to do negative damage. So what's going to happen here is we're going to say like -10, And when we do this, it's going to actually go, oh, so we're taking -10 damage. We're going to subtract a -10, which is mathematically just adding 10. So that's going to work out for us really nicely. So we're going to do take damage. Again, we can use PS. We're going to do ps.value, .myValue. But we want that to be negative. So we're going to do negative ps.myValue and a semicolon. Now, we're already getting a small problem here, and that is we cannot convert from float to int. And that's because when we created myValue, we said that that's going to be a float in case we need to do, a vector or something crazy in there and have it be decimals. So what we need to do now is make sure that myValue is actually an integer. And the easiest way to do that, let's see if it's going to let me, I think it'll let me cast it. We're going to try doing a cast first. And this is basically going to force it to be an integer. Now, we need to remember that that is going to be subject to integer rounding. And for example, what that means is, actually it's truncation. Again, don't type this. I'm just trying to write some notes here. This is going to use truncation. And what truncation means is ordinarily when we see a number like 1.3, we would say, hey, that rounds down. And whoops, whoa, we don't want any of that. Let's try that again. But 1.3 is going to round down, and that's going to turn into just a 1, okay, because it rounds down. However, normally what happens is when we see a number like 1.8, we decide, you know what, that is closer to 2, and we're going to do 2. In truncation, that's not how that works. We can't do it like that. The way truncation is going to work is it actually decides it's going to delete the decimal and everything after it. So in the case of 1.8, what we're really doing is we're saying no to that point, anything after the decimal place. So 1.8 is, whoops, I can't type. 1.8 is actually going to round to 1. In fact, 1.99999, which is as high of precision a float as we can get, is still going to evaluate to just 1. It doesn't become 2 until it becomes 2. So that's important to recognize about how floating works. And because what it's really doing here is it's going, we don't need that point, and now we just have the 1 left over. It's just going to take this over here, and it's going to grab the decimal point and everything after it and just throw it in the garbage. Point, it's gone, and now we've got 1 equals 1. Okay, so that's how truncation is going to work. So we do have to keep that in mind. If you make your health pack worth 1.8, the player is only going to get 1 point of healing off of that. But we'll simplify that, and we just will only use decimals in there. Or I'm sorry, not decimals, excuse me. We'll only use whole numbers in there, and then it won't be a problem. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. If we save this, we do have one more little challenge. So I'm going to test this first with full hit points. And what we're going to notice here is I run into it, and actually I can. It's still rigid, so it's preventing me from moving through it, which is kind of fun. We can actually adjust that. It is definitely blocking my collision, but also I'm not able to actually hit it, and that's because my hit points is full. But I'm going to adjust my hit points down. Let's give myself 60 or so. And theoretically, when I hit that hit point pack, we want it to jump up to 70. So let's see what happens here. So I'm hitting it. Again, it's not changing to 70. And that's kind of a problem. So we're going to take another look at our code here. Actually, we're going to take a look at our game object. And one of the things that we do need to pay attention to is that we want to make sure that this collider is what's called a trigger. That's going to allow me, first off, to move through it. It's not going to stop me. And that's also going to hopefully trigger that collision. So we're going to try this again and try to hit. And I don't think, it's definitely still acting very, very rigid for me. Hang on here. This was working in my demo. Let's see. Health pack. Okay, so we're going to turn off that trigger, and we are going to do another test here. Okay, so some quick changes that we're going to make here. I was looking through this while we were on pause for just a quick second, and it turns out we are missing a couple things. Actually, we've got a few too many things we need to get rid of. So we're going to go jump back into that health pickup, and we do need to like mess with some of these colliders. So we have the capsule on the outside. We're going to jump back inside here. We're going to get rid of these extra capsule colliders. I don't think they're actually what's messing us up, but they shouldn't be there. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of both of those. And then we're also going to go in here and double check, make sure we don't have any other loose colliders running around, because those can always cause some troubles. We're going to go ahead and if you did click on, I can't remember where I left things. If you did make this a trigger, please don't make that a trigger. That's not correct. I had that wrong. So although we could do something with that, that's not really a great option here. And I did leave everything else alone here. So we're going to go ahead and rerun this. And one of the things that I had noticed during my little private break that I took there just a second ago is I did forget on player to set this while the game was running. I set it while we were on pause, and since HP does get set to HP max every single time we run, that is going to need to be adjusted. So while the game is running, I'm going to make sure that we set this to something low like 70, and I'm going to hit this, and it is actually picking up correctly. Now our challenge is I'm hitting this multiple times here, and the HP button is not going away, which is kind of cool if I want to make this a persistent buff. Maybe it's like, a lake of healing or something like that. But really I want this to pick up and destroy if I get any hit points out of it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and stop our game, and we're going to just say, and normally I don't like doing this. I really like the objects deal with their own deletions and collisions and things like that. But this one time, we're going to do it a little bit differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say destroy, collision.gameObjects. And that's going to basically destroy the other thing, which in this case, since I am in player script, it's going to be that health pickup. It's going to destroy its game object. So now when I save, let's go ahead and save that. When I save and I run this, again, I need to make sure that I'm doing this live. So I'm knocking out my hit points. I'm going to knock that down to 70. And I hit the bar. It is going to 80, just like it should. That's fantastic. And we're going to do one more quick test, which is I'm going to go ahead and try to hit this while I'm at 100. And you're going to notice that health bar isn't going anywhere, which is also good. So I can't hit the pickup with 100 hit points. It's still there, which is really what we want. And I can shoot it. It will actually absorb bullets, which I'm not sure how I feel about that exactly, but it is definitely detecting bullets, or not detecting, but the bullets are detecting it, which means that we're basically done. This is a pretty good spot for us to stop. The last thing that I want to do is I actually want to make this thing rotate a little bit. It'll just kind of add a little bit of pizzazz to it and help if I'm over here and not sure what that thing is in front of me that looks like a pipe. What is that thing? And so we want to be able to, we wanted to kind of just gently rotate a bit. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go back into the pickup script. We're going to set a rotation angle, and this is going to look very, very familiar to you if you remember some of the previous installments. We're going to call this rot angle. And we're going to say something nice and slow. I'm thinking like 20. And we're going to look back at our player script, and literally all we're going to do here is I'm going up to my transform.rotate code, and I'm just grabbing this one line. It's under key code E in player script. That's transform.rotate vector by rot angle times time.delta time. this is a perfect chunk of code for what we want to do here. I'm just going to drop in an update. We don't need to wait for key codes. I just wanted to do this all the time and kind of just gently rotate here. We can adjust the specific value. 20 might be a little high. We can adjust that in the inspector. And so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now when we run, we should just get this gently, actually 20 is pretty nice. I kind of like that. We should get this gently rotating orb. Again, if I try to collide with it, nothing's happening. But if I artificially lower my hit points because my player is damaged, so I'm going to lower this down to 70, and I'm going to collide with it. We are now getting healed to 80. That's updating our health bar, and everything is good. Now you will notice if I edit my health bar directly, it's not, or not health bar, but my HP value directly, it's not actually lowering my health bar. And the reason is because that means that take damage function isn't being triggered. So technically I could give myself like 500 health here and the game would just let me do it. But interestingly, if I did hit a health pickup, actually let's just throw one in the game while I'm like running around here. If I just threw a health pickup in the game and I collide with it, oh, I'm not able to collide with it. That's right, because my hit points is not below hit point max. But it is going to restore me and prevent me from, if it did, it would just heal me actually down to 100 hit points because I'm not at full, or because I'm over the full limit. But anyways, that's a side note. We don't really need to worry about that. That's just kind of a weird, I don't know, that trivia is not even quite the right word for it. But here we go. So everything is good. Now we can take that health pickup. It's at 0 right now. I'm just going to move it kind of over there. But we really, the important thing here is we have that prefab and we can kind of mess with it there and manipulate it from the prefab level. And we can spawn more instances of that prefab later if we want to. Excuse me. So that's it for this installment. That concludes episode 8, the health pickup. For our next installment, there's quite a few directions we could go with this, but I'm thinking what we'll probably do is, I haven't really decided, we'll either do a win-lose condition or possibly add extra generic guns to our game, so that way we can change our firing patterns and do some more interesting things with the weapons. I feel like a lot of first-person shooters are defined by their weapon choices, so we want to give the players some extra options beyond basically what I'm treating as a pistol, even though it is more modeled like a rifle on our particular model. So that's it for our that's it for our tutorial for today. That ends episode 8. If you enjoyed what you heard, please, of course, like and subscribe. And as always, in closing, keep on creating. Have a great day, nerds.